Hello, my name is Dr. Jim Doty, and I'm the host of the Into the Magic Shop podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. Hi, this is Dr. Jim Doty, host of the Into the Magic Shop podcast. My guest today is Tiffany Shlain, artist, activist, Emmy-nominated filmmaker, and national best-selling author, as well as founder of the Webby Awards. Tiffany's art spans the areas of sculpture, film, photography, and performance. Her themes frequently explore the intersection of feminism, philosophy, technology, neuroscience, and nature. Our conversation today will be quite broad. We'll discuss compassion, self-compassion, human connection, the power of manifestation, and the need sometimes for a break from social media. We'll also discuss her new film, which debuts in March of this year, called The Adolescent Brain. I hope you enjoy our discussion today. Thank you for listening. Tiffany, it's so great to see you. It's been so long since our last interaction, a week ago or so?
But it had been a long time since I had seen you, and I was so happy. I was like, when are our worlds going to cross again?
Actually, I'm surprised it has taken so long.
It just took a pandemic to just fuck things up. Yeah,
exactly. Stir things up a little bit. Actually, I had to leave the.
I know.
So for our listeners, Tiffany and I were at a retreat, and unfortunately, after the first day, I was ill with the flu and had to leave. So we're reconnecting again. But thank you so much for being with me. You know, I'll do an introduction, or I should say, I've done an introduction, which will be added on later, but so we don't have to go through all of that. But I would like to say that, number one, you're one of my favorite people. Number two, you're extraordinarily accomplished in so many domains, and it's humbling to be with you. So what I want to talk about maybe is what excites you at this moment. I do know that you have a film coming out with Goldie Hawn on the adolescent brain, and maybe you could start with that, or whatever you want to start with.
Yeah, well, first, it's so great to be here with you. I love your work, and I was thinking fondly when the UCSF, I think it was like the Neuroscience Center, connected neuroscientists and artists, and I did an art project that was using some of your amazing work. So it's really fun. First of all, we need to do another project. I completely agree. And I want to bring out, that project was called The Brain Portrait, which we should put somewhere in the world again. But I am working on 3 things right now that I'm very excited about. Well, I'm worried about many things in the world. I'm trying to channel everything into my work. So the 3 things are, first, I am directing and co-writing a film on the teen brain. And Goldie Hawn is executive producing with Mind Up, which is an organization that she has for young people and now moving into teens. And really, I'm trying to distill. There's a wonderful researcher, Ellen Galinsky. Do you know her?
No, I don't.
Oh, she's terrific. She has a new book coming out this spring called The Breakthrough Years, and she interviewed 45 of the top neuroscientists on adolescent medicine. And I am going into her book and distilling some of the top ideas there, and going outside of the book and just some of my favorite thinkers on this subject. And I'm trying to crystallize it into like a 10-minute film that teens will watch, and the adults that love them will watch too, on like basically how to both thrive, how to navigate the world, what are like ways to regulate, and really teach them about the brain, because we've never known as much as we know right now about the brain, which is always exciting. But I think about when I was a teen, which is it's an awkward period in human development, because so much change is happening, and you're kind of in between these 2 worlds of being a child and an adult, although sometimes you look like an adult, even though you still aren't developed that way yet. And if I had known when I was a teen, kind of struggling through it, that why I was doing certain things, or it was totally normal what I was feeling, or reframing it really, that instead of it being, that I was a super learner and emotionally brilliant and learning to be brave and all these positive psychology frameworks, to this period which a lot of these researchers and scientists use, I think it would have just made it easier. I mean, I just find whenever I'm in a situation that's challenging and I learn why it's happening, when it'll be over, what I can do to mitigate it, and that I'm not alone. And I think those are really powerful ideas. So we're using, like in my filmmaking style, a lot of animations and a lot of metaphors to get to these bigger ideas. So that's the film, and it comes out in March 2024. Do you want me to tell you the other two things, or I don't know if you want to
Let me
say
ask
anything.
you some questions about
Yeah.
that, but then we'll get to the other two things at some
Okay.
point. Because I could see our time will pass extraordinarily fast.
Yeah.
And in terms of the film, I think you made a couple excellent points, which is one, um, reframing, and it's interesting and unfortunate that this has not really been out there in the sense readily available for teens or for them to understand it. And
That's
whether
right.
you're a teen or frankly an adult, this idea of reframing or changing your perception, I think, is very, very important. I think the other thing that is hard, especially with hormonal changes and things like that, emotion regulation. And so I think that's another one where, and there is available now different uh, programs to teach individuals that, in fact, they have the ability to regulate their emotional state. They just have to gain some self awareness or insight. And again, to emphasize, whether you're a child
Or
or
an
an
adult.
adult,
I mean,
these are
yeah,
important things.
I'm so
So,
glad you brought that up because it's really, I mean, at my point in life, like I have figured out the things I need to do to self-regulate. And when I'm upset, what are the things that calm me? And and I think as a teen, really thinking about all and investigating and trying and experimenting with all the different things that you can do, whether it's learning how to breathe correctly, whether it's talking to a friend, writing, is it painting, is it playing music, what's at your disposal to regulate yourself. And I think the more you understand the science around that, I mean, even breathing, which I'm working on this animation about it, I really realized I've been breathing wrong. And I think it was only after talking to several different scientists on this subject, but really, again, understanding the science exactly helps you really structure your body correctly to breathe in a way that really calms you and turns your prefrontal cortex back on when your amygdala is taken over. So I think all these things, like the more you, and some of it, you just need to understand how it works a little better. And maybe that's through a simple animation and taking the science and really understanding, if I feel this way, I can do this and it will make me get back to a calmer state and help me be able to, like, you know, be in the world in a better way. Because, life is messy. I mean, we have so many emotions throughout the day, even us. I mean, but they feel them so much bigger than we do.
no, I think that's a good point. I think in addition to emotion regulation, I think it's also helpful for people to understand the way in which emotions can hold us hostage. And what I mean
Yes.
by that is that all of us have challenging experiences. And again, on some level, we're talking about mostly adolescence, but this is true of each and every one of us, is that uh, uh, we don't appreciate that when we have an experience has no valence. It's neither good nor it's bad. It's an experience. The challenge is the emotion that we tag that experience with. And then as a result of that, we become a hostage to that emotion related to the memory. And what I mean by that is, let's say you get in a fight with somebody who maybe has done something negative towards you. Then you have all this animosity, and sometimes it can be fear associated with that. So every time you think of that person, that emotional state comes up. And the challenge with emotional states is they're associated with physiologic changes. And so I think that making individuals understand that the embedding of these emotions with memories actually can be very, very negative. And the other aspect that goes with that is actually, and I think this is hard for adolescents, is understanding self agency.
Yes. I love the way you think. Yeah, we need to have a separate call. I would love to show you a couple of the metaphors that I'm using, that we're creating. Because you know, I think agency, and that is a period when you're a teen, you're slowly getting more control. I mean, ultimately, if you do a good job as a parent, you're like, you need to know how to do all of this without me, right? That's the ultimate thing you're teaching your child or your teen. And feeling a sense of agency over your life. And then when you do have these big emotions, which happen all throughout your life,
Oh, sure.
what are healthy strategies to calm yourself? Because there's certainly a plethora of unhealthy ways to regulate that, whether it's,
I'm familiar with them from my own childhood.
well, it's an interesting thing because, I think that one of the biggest challenges, I mean, I've been a teen, I've had a teen, I have another teen right now. And for me, it's like how to frame it in a way that they will understand it and it'll speak to them without feeling didactic, because I think their whole life they're having, adults kind of telling them why to do things and they haven't had enough experiences yet to understand, oh, yeah, that does make sense. I love that Mark Twain quote. What is it? Oh, what is it? I was in something about like, my father didn't know anything. And by the time I was 20, I was amazing how much he had learned. Like, I know I'm getting that
Right.
quote wrong, but it's
Yeah,
something
no,
about,
I know. It goes along the lines of, when I was a teen, I knew everything. I'm an
right.
adult and I know nothing, right?
Exact
And
something.
yeah,
So
no,
I think this might be one of my most challenging, but I love a juicy challenge like this. I love taking neuroscience and making it accessible. And my father was a surgeon who both wrote about the brain and operated on the brain. And he, when I was young, would use metaphors to teach it to me. And I am really carrying that on. And my mom's a psychologist, and, learning how you're going to have so many emotions and how to navigate them. It's the great challenge of being human, of the human condition is messy. You're always a work in progress on some level. And here's some tools to navigate it all. And that's really the goal of it.
that brings up two things in my mind. One is this idea of wabi sabi, which I'm sure you're probably
Yes.
familiar with.
Yeah.
This idea of our incompleteness, imperfection, and what's the
Hmm.
third one? Imperfection, incomplete. There's a third one which I can't recall, but the point is that unfortunately, so many people strive for perfection. And I think, unfortunately, oftentimes parents create this narrative where they it's hard for them to accept their child as they are
Hmm.
versus how they want them to be. And then
Hmm.
they pound them with this narrative of how they should be, where then that creates a driver that's not always healthy to
Hmm.
perform for their parents versus uh, understanding that what's important is that they be themselves. But in our modern society, with the Western capitalist narrative of success, which is wealth, position, power, people get distracted.
Hmm.
And oftentimes, parents, in part, are responsible for that. So then they have a child who goes out and does all the things they're quote unquote supposed to do. And then at the end of the day, they're unhappy.
Yeah. What are I would actually love your thoughts on, we are going to have something on compassion. And how, in the most, how would you describe to a teen why it's important to develop that muscle?
Well, if you don't, you're going to be unhappy. And the
That's that's pretty. That's good. That cuts to it. That's what I love. I love just trying to get to like what is the heart of this idea.
well, but this is frankly the challenge. You mentioned you have teens. I have three children, but one just turned 20 and one's
Mm,
14. And it's interesting because in Silicon Valley, as you know, there's this push that children are expected to be, at the top of their class. They are expected to
mhm,
go to the good school, et cetera, et cetera. And I think getting back to your initial question, uh, uh, my statement is be kind, do the best you can, and I have no further demands. uh,
Mhm.
because beating into somebody that if you don't get straight A's, you're nothing, only creates a situation of despair and oftentimes a feeling of hopelessness if you can't perform.
Mhm.
And this is why we've had multiple episodes of suicide from teens who have felt this pressure on them. I think the only thing that there should be pressure on is to be nice to people, to be kind, to be thoughtful, to understand that others are suffering, and that the issue isn't about being best for me. It's about taking the abilities you have and trying to reach your greatest potential. Because when you're able to do that, one, it makes you feel good. Two, it makes you realize that if you're smart and you work hard, you have choices. And I think that one of the sad parts, although I think it's being fixed now, is this idea that every child is a winner, where
Mhm.
you run a race and everybody gets an award, and that's not
Mhm.
life. And what it has done for a lot of children, it's actually created a sense of entitlement that they don't really have to work hard, but they're still a winner. And that's not
Mhm.
how society works. I mean, unfortunately, the nature of the world is no, we're not all winners. And if you want to achieve, you have to perform. And if you don't want to achieve, that's perfectly fine, but you also have to accept the consequences of that.
I think I really like what you were saying. I mean, if you think about, being kind and being compassionate and being aware of others' suffering is, yeah, it's just those are the things, no matter what, that you can do. And there's a lot of things that are out of your control. And I totally agree. Like trying your best. I mean, that's what we say. Just do your best because everyone's got a different set of superpowers and strengths and weaknesses. But the being kind part and being thoughtful and being compassionate of others' suffering is, yeah, I mean, it's so important. And it's not, I mean, I do think there's more of a language of it taught in schools than certainly when I was in school. I mean, it feels like there's a whole new set of words and teachings and social emotional learnings that were not around when I was growing up. That I'm happy are being integrated. Even teens having words for these emotions. Like I made this film a while ago called The Science of Character, where we really take like Marty Seligman and his ideas about character strengths, and even giving a word to things like curiosity, love of learning, social intelligence, humor. Giving words like everybody's made up of these 24 strengths, and people have different sets of which ones are stronger and weaker. But these are like giving words to things that are ineffable makes them where you feel like you understand them, you have some agency, you can work on them. So I think a lot of this is giving science metaphors to understand and giving kind of the messiness language to work with.
Yeah, and I think having children understand the messiness of life hopefully helps them get over this sense of being judged all the time and this paranoia or fear that
Mm-hmm.
if people find out who I really am, they're not going to like me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is this issue with it's sort of an interesting paradox. You see this quote unquote group of influencers on the internet, whether it's
Yeah.
Instagram or TikTok, who give a perception that their lives are perfect.
Yeah.
Yet, of course, I'm sure you've seen the behind the scenes photographs where they've been photoshopped or
Yeah.
it's all a false narrative. And sometimes it gets back to this issue of what is success. And I think that so on the one hand, the many of these influences, it's just fake, and they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
live up to a standard that no one can live up to. And in
Mm-hmm.
fact, many of them are suffering, and that's why you unfortunately see a lot of mental health issues and suicides among that
Mm-hmm.
subset. But then conversely, you have the people who are watching this stuff who buy into this
Yeah.
and somehow believe this. And I think one of
Yeah.
the most powerful tools you have is self acceptance. And when you're no longer afraid of being who you are, actually, people accept you much more than if they
Mhm.
think you're putting on an act.
Yeah, I think I'm so glad you brought that up because, of course, even when I was a teen, I was comparing myself. I think that's human nature, especially at that age when you're trying to figure out who you are. You see someone being some way. I remember I used to try on all these different looks when I was a teen. I'm like, what feels right? And sorry, that would be my dog right behind me. And oh my gosh, she's all about kindness and compassion. I think animals. I think that is the beautiful thing about relationships with animals is they're just such pure love and kindness. Anyways, but I was like, but what I was saying, a comparison is natural, but of course, social media has magnified it so much. And I think one of the big messages also we're going to get in the film is kind of question the algorithm, question what you see, why you're seeing it, question it, and that's critical thinking. And I think really kind of pushing back on everything being pushed on you, just like advertisers. And, everybody, most people online they don't have your best interest in mind. They want to get you,
What
and
what a
hopefully your
shock.
parents do. Well, but that is something I think with advertising, people have got to learn that. But with social media, they're so surrounded by it. Question it. Why do you keep getting fed that next video? Or is that really how her life is or his life? And, I know we're all human. And, I think that you never know what's going on in somebody else's life, even as perfect as it may seem. And I think really questioning those things is another idea that we're trying to get into the film. And, um, question why you keep on wanting to eat that next snack that's so filled with salt and sugar, and question
Why did
there's
you have to bring that up? I was just
a
eating that snack a second ago.
well, we're actually trying to approach like because I think teens are a little sick of like hearing about screen time being bad. Because some screen time is good. There's some of them connect. I was watching a friend of mine telling me how her teen son, that is the way he connects with other teen boys. And that I turn off screens one day a week,
Right.
and I have for almost 15 years. So that's like been my saving grace of really gaining perspective of the screen use, which I do think there are some wonderful parts about being online, even connecting to you and the internet and Wikipedia, blah, blah, blah. And then there's, of course, all these things we need to question, and we need to have the courage to unplug and to step away from the internet and step away from all these forces trying to influence your minds so you can hear yourself think. And I'm just working on an essay of, I think I'm near 15 or 14 years. I have to like count it out of doing tech Shabbats. That's what I call them. And I ended up writing a book called 24/6 about how profound it was for me and my family to turn off screens one day a week. But I think the biggest thing is I can hear myself think. And I think we're living in a world where it's totally natural. You wake up and the first thing you do is look at your phone, and you're just responding to texts and notifications and emails and news headlines, and you're just in response and reaction. And there's so many forces trying to make you think something or react to something. And when I turn off my screens every week on Friday night, I feel this amazing sense of exhaling. And then usually Saturday morning, first of all, I have my best sleep of the week by far because my phone's not in my room. And then on Saturday morning, I journal for at least 3 hours before most people get up in my house. But it's really so I can hear myself think, and all of my clearest ideas come out then. My most creative insights come out then. And really, I feel like I'm returning to myself, and I am trying to unpack all of the feelings and messiness and some really powerful insights that I think I can't hear during the week because it's so noisy in my head in response mode. So I think really, you know, communicating that while there are some beautiful aspects to the internet, there are some very scary disinformation aspects. There are some very scary, just as you were saying, this kind of sense that everyone else is living without emotional mess, which is not true. And just a lot of people trying to influence your thoughts. And as a teen, what I remember being a teen is I was like this, trying to figure out who I am and have the space to figure out who I am. So I think really trying to frame it in a larger way of trying to understand who you are and what you think is really throughout your life so valuable.
Well, this is the nature of being present, which is very, very
Hmm.
hard for people, especially in the modern world. And I think that's an incredible idea. It's interesting. My younger son, well, both of them, I would like to believe are fairly thoughtful, but my youngest son, he'll play his games or be on the internet for a while, and then he'll say, "Okay, I'm done. I've had enough," and
Hmm.
then he goes off and does his homework or whatever it is. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because he is able to self-regulate in that sense. And I have to say, he's actually probably better than I at that, actually. So,
Do you think that, I mean, that's so interesting because I mean that is the point. It's like you have to develop a muscle to understand when, it feels good, feels good. Oh, okay, it stops feeling good. Get off of the device. And
yeah.
I even say that to myself, Tiffany. I literally say, Tiffany, put it away, put it in the other room when I'm trying to focus. And but it is about developing that muscle, because you need to live life unmediated. And I'm trying to get to that idea a lot in the film of like experiences are what develop your prefrontal cortex and discernment and judgment and critical thinking. So you need to have as many real life experiences as possible, and that's what develops it. And so it's a lot about you know trying out a lot of different things, putting yourself in a lot of situations so you can learn so that the next time you have that knowledge. So there's so many things that adults and parents can tell you that you're not going to really learn until you do it. And then you're going to go,
Well,
okay, that
yeah.
makes sense now.
Yes. No, no, I think that's exactly right. What was I going Oh, do you know Dan Siegel?
Oh yeah. In fact, I have a call with him tomorrow. He was
Oh,
at my
good.
conference
I know
and,
I saw him. I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
The reason I bring that up is actually he and I did a podcast a few weeks ago,
Oh,
and you
oh,
might
I want to
like it
listen to
because,
that. Is it up already?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Okay.
we talked about many of these things, and we ended up on a very strange conversation about enneagrams. Have you ever?
Oh, wait a minute. So what did you come to?
Well, I there's little scientific evidence, but they're used by a fair number of people for sort of for getting a perspective. But we talked about what our Enneagram scores are, and I can't remember what they are. But it was funny because mine was one where he asked a question, and it was based on how if you have this Enneagram, how would you react? And it was like walking into a party, and I said something like, "Well, I would walk in and introduce myself to different people and just have conversations." He said, "Well, see, I'm the opposite. I would go into a corner and then look for different ways to escape if I had to."
That's funny that you say that after just being with the conference with him. I wouldn't have. It's so interesting when people say like I'm really an introvert and like you wouldn't think that of them, but that's the way they identify. And they're really pushing themselves to be
Oh, yeah. I
an
think that's
extrovert in
exactly right.
situations. Yeah, that's
Yeah, so
interesting.
well, we've covered this topic. You
We
had
covered
2
the
other
film.
ones. Well, and actually, maybe offline, you and I can get together to
I would
talk
love
about
that.
that if,
I would love that.
so
Yeah, we'd love to do that. And then the other thing that kind of surprised me, not surprised me is, I grew up in Northern California, right near Muir Woods, and I would go there with my family all the time growing up, and it was like this cathedral of these oldest trees in the world, and it felt a very, very sacred place for my family to visit in this cathedral of redwood trees, some that were like over 1,200 years old, and I was always in such awe of them. And then, cut to, lived all over the world and kind of came back to Marin County as an adult with my husband and when we were starting a family and returned to these redwoods. And then during the pandemic, returned to them even more when that was like the only way you felt during those first couple months when you were like, is the world ending? And I would go into Muir Woods and just like feel that incredible wisdom of these trees. And I started making art. Physical art. I've always like, mostly worked in film and in writing as a way to communicate. But early in my career, I worked in sculpture, but then again, I kind of found it again. And I started making these sculptures and I basically started thinking, the entrance of Muir Woods, or usually any national park, there's like a big tree ring slice that shows the
right.
history of world events through the tree ring. It's called dendrochronology, the science of tree ring dating. And I have always been so struck by that concept of telling time, like trees are these ancient timekeepers and how amazing, but always the facts on them left me so cold. Like they were like, Christopher Columbus discovered America or the Battle of Hastings. It was always this kind of very male patriarchal colonial dates. The only dates that usually spoke to me is like this tree was born on this, this tree was cut down or something like that. Anyway, so during the pandemic, I'm thinking, is the world ending? What have these trees have seen? Have these trees experienced another pandemic? Probably, if they're 1,200 years old. And then I thought, I want to reimagine what's told on these tree ring timelines. And I want to create a feminist history tree ring. And it was literally one of the most satisfying things I've ever done, especially having two daughters, being a total feminist, making a lot of films about feminist history. And so took a gigantic, over 5-foot tree slice and learned how to work with trees and worked with pyrographers, which is like calligraphy with fire. I spent a year researching what would be distilled onto the text. And I distilled it into 30 lines of text. And the piece is called a made-up word I made up called dendrofeminology. And it premiered, it debuted I did an art installation at the Ferry Building called Human Nature, where there was like 24 pieces of art, 7 tree rings tackling different subjects. And then it was just on the National Mall, right in front of the Washington Monument this November, which was incredibly exciting. And it was like,
Oh, yeah.
felt like a big, intervention there. And amongst all these monuments about male achievement. And anyway, so it was there. And next, I have a solo exhibition in New York with the Nancy Hoffman Gallery in Chelsea this fall, where the tree ring will be there. And we'll probably do another, bring it out into the open, into the wild. And I'm really excited about working in tree rings. And I'm doing just as a way to think about anything, really, just to think about time through the tree rings. I did another one that looks like the evolution of human perspective, moments that humans were decentered, and I did it on a huge redwood. So I basically have a list for like so many ideas I want to explore. It's very exciting to me. And then my husband, who's a professor at UC Berkeley and also an artist, he and I are doing an exhibition together in LA in the fall that also will have a tree ring component and an AI component, called Ancient Wisdom for a Future Ecology, Trees, Time, and Technology. And, I guess I feel like this could be like this next chapter for me I feel like there's so much to explore with trees. And it's almost like I feel like I returned to my roots. I didn't mean to use that metaphor, but I really feel like I just returned to myself. Like I was surrounded by these incredible beings my whole growing up. And now oh my God, this is almost like the Mark Twain quote. Like there was all this wisdom right around me, but I didn't really understand it until I was an adult returning to it. And I feel like looking through the world through tree ring timelines is like infinitely fascinating to me. And I actually have a couple about the brain. I did one, every slice of a tree looks so different. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's amazing. They're like, and you don't really like, and I usually hang them on the wall of the gallery. So it's like a slice, but it looks like a sculpture hung on the wall. And they all just, so the feminist history tree ring is a deodar cedar, and it's just gorgeous. You can really see the lines well. And then a redwood is kind of rich and yummy, kind of like red orange color. But an olive tree in a slice actually looks like a brain slice. And I've spent my career making a lot of art about neuroscience and brains. And this slice looked both like a slice of a brain that you would see in a lab and also like a flower. And so
Wow.
I called this particular piece Flowers and Humans. And there was a chapter in one of my father's books that got edited out, but after he passed away. And I understood why it was edited out, but I love this chapter so much. I thought someday I'm going to turn it into a piece of art. And his general idea was that humans and flowers have co-evolved. That basically there's so many different theories on why is the human brain bigger than any other species. And there's lots of different ideas around it. And my father's idea was because of flowers, that early Homo sapiens would be drawn to the beauty of a flower, the beauty and the smell, and then go to the flower. And sure enough, behind the flower, there was a yummy orange or piece of fruit. And then they'd eat the fruit, and then their brain would be flooded with like ascorbic acid and glucose. And you had enough energy from the sugar to have these bigger thoughts. And I just thought that was about the coolest idea I'd ever heard. I also love flowers, and this thought that we bring flowers to every important event in our lives and to woo someone, to mark someone's life or their death. And we have this co-evolution relationship with flowers. And so I took this slice of olive tree that looks both like a brain and a flower and distilled that 50-page chapter from my father into about like 3 points on the tree ring. So as you can see, I am excited about taking this idea into so many different directions because there's so much there. And I'm super excited. I'm just super excited about like having a new canvas and a new medium to think about things.
Well, it's interesting because in some ways you're exemplifying sort of how creativity, how curiosity, how awe can create a life, and how powerful it is, and how it can excite you every day,
Yes.
because you oftentimes, in sort of the nature of the messy world, you forget these things. You were talking about your experience in the forest. I'm sure you're familiar with the Japanese
Forest bathing.
idea for
Yes.
forest bathing, right? What is
Yes.
it?
Actually, I did
Shinrin
it at that
Yoku. Shinrin
retreat.
Yoku.
Yes, I wish
Yeah.
you had been there. There was a wonderful forest bathing walking experience that
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed it. Yeah, I was going to do a sort of a gathering on sort of compassion, self-compassion, and how it changes you. But alas, I wasn't there. Um, but okay, so we did two things. Now,
Oh,
did we
wait,
do the third already?
one
Oh,
thing
go
I have
ahead.
to say that I was very excited about when I did the, well, I wanna talk about self-compassion for a second because but wait, I wanna talk about something else first, is the forest bathing experience at the retreat where we desperately missed you being there. But I was walking through, and there was a guide kind of walking us through, and we were talking about how, and I think about this a lot when I'm among the trees, is they're taking the carbon dioxide and they're converting it into very clean, fresh oxygen. And as I was in this kind of cathedral of redwoods at this retreat, I was feeling the air was so fresh. The oxygen was so fresh. It was like the freshest oxygen. And I never had thought about it that way. I think better because this is the freshest oxygen you can get is amongst the trees who are making it for you. And what a beautiful symbiotic relationship. I mean, I wish we didn't make so much carbon dioxide, but we make it, the trees convert it, turn it into oxygen, and we get all this fresh oxygen for our brain. So that was one thought. But then self-compassion. So I write, I'm a big journaler. My husband calls me an extreme journaler because I do, I really use it as self therapy and processing and really to hear myself think. But
Yeah.
it's like my best appointments with myself are to journal, and I could just write for hours, 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 hours. I mean, it never doesn't feel good. You know how your son was like, I need to go away now. Like I literally, unless I had other things to do, could just sit there on a
You have
Shabbat.
to be pulled away from
It
it.
kind of,
Well,
but it,
do you remember Cheryl Teagues's ex-husband? His name was, what was his name? Was Beard, I think his name
no,
was.
I don't
He
know.
lived a lot in Africa,
Huh.
and he was an excessive journalist, to say the least. So, his whole day was journaling,
Well,
and
it's
he would
interesting.
collect.
It's not like I really only do that on my tech-free days of Shabbat, like where I really go deep. Like, but throughout each day, I do a practice to start the day and end the day. And it was really me trying to integrate the feeling I felt on Shabbat throughout the week. And I use a 5-minute journal, which is this great journal you can get. And I give it out as gifts all the time because it's such a simple, and I don't really need prompts, but I really like a good prompt. And this just has 3 lines on it, and in the morning it says, what are 3 things you're grateful for? And of course all the research shows don't be general, be specific, and then you'll start looking for those moments. So I just write those 3 things, and then it has a line that says daily affirmation. Now that always has struck me as a little woo woo. I'm being perfectly honest, I normally didn't fill it out. I just don't, that doesn't that prompt doesn't work for me until I I was reading about Shauna Shapiro. I think that is her name. That she wrote a
Oh
book
yeah,
called
she's
Good
Love
Morning, I Love
Yourself.
You.
Love,
Good Morning, I
yes,
Love
yeah.
You. And she was going through a really hard time. And a teacher of hers just put your hand on your heart and just say, I love you. So since I read that, I have been doing that for the last 6 months as my under that line. This is it. I said, Good morning. Good morning, Tiffany. I love you. And I'm telling you, it's such a simple thing to do, but it's such self compassion. And it's like, I'm going to start the day by knowing you're messy. You have all these feelings you wish you didn't have, whatever it is, but I love you. I love you. And it's like, starting with yourself, and then of course you're loving all the members and animals in your family and people and having compassion, but starting with yourself is so powerful. And that's a new thing I've been doing, so I recommend it to any listener. You can just even do it on a piece of paper. Don't look at your phone. Oh, I never look. So all of those things happen without me looking at my phone in the morning. So I use it for my alarm clock, like at most humans on this planet today, but I have it on airplane mode. And I have my coffee and I do my 5-minute journal, and it takes me just about, I don't know, 5 minutes. It's like it says. And then I return to that same book at night, and it says, what are 3 great things that happened today? And they're beautiful. They're things, even in the worst day you can find the beauty. And then, like, what's one thing you learned, which to me I always interpret as like, what's one thing I wish I did differently? So a little learning from the day. And those 2 bookends to my day. And I have so many of these used books that I save because I like to flip through them sometimes. Um, that's my little self-compassion new exercise I've been doing.
Well, actually, Shauna Shapiro and I are good friends.
Oh,
What a
well,
shock.
she and I have been. She lives in Mill Valley too, and we have wanted to connect. And now having this conversation, like, I need to reach out to her and let her know that I really appreciated that teaching.
Yeah, I think the last time, I may be wrong, but the last time her and I were together, we both did a thing for Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop Health, which
That's
I can assure you, I took a lot of flack
I'm
for
sure.
doing that.
I'm sure.
Well, the thing is, I talk science,
Yeah.
but I had all these people send me notes. How could you do that? She is promoting quackery. And I said, look,
Mhm.
I did something based on science that I felt could help people.
Mhm.
Whatever they do outside of that, yes, I may agree with you or not, but my space was to offer something to people that would benefit them, and whether it's there or in some other venue, I'm
Yeah.
doing my thing.
Yeah. Of course.
But yeah, she's actually a special person. In fact, we spent some time together with she recently got married again. I don't know if you know that. And
I don't know her
but
that well, but
yeah, before she got married, we ended up spending time together with her and her fiance, and actually it was quite nice. And so yeah, so
nice.
she's very sweet,
Well,
and
maybe,
that
I mean,
book
we
is
have
very
it.
helpful.
Yeah, we have we have, and now I'm really feeling like I need to meet her for a cup of coffee in Mill Valley. But sometimes it's just, sometimes there's just certain stages in your life where you're like, I mean, I just kind of love, like, I love that about getting older, actually, is that um even that gathering, which we can say was gathered by Krista Tippett, who's an amazing human. And I was really appreciating, I was on her show years ago, and then was on during the pandemic, really talking about what we talked about with, like, um, my day without screens, and how that was like just a lifesaver during the pandemic. But I just was loving how long I've known people, and then running into you and just the layers. I just love that about getting older. And some people, you've heard about their ideas, you haven't met, then you meet them and you're like, oh, finally we're meeting. But I've already been meeting your ideas for a while, and now we're going to
Yes,
meet
yes,
in the 3-dimensional human form. But I love
yeah.
that about getting older. I went to a friend's 80th this last weekend, and she just was filled with such joy, and she's in a wonderful marriage and has been for since she was in her 20s. And I said to her, I'm like, so what, you live such a good life, what is it? And she goes, just don't sweat the small stuff and appreciate every day. And her husband were like, before we go to sleep every night, we say, we're so lucky. They say that every night before they sleep. And I was like, that's the secret. Be
No, it
grateful.
is.
Don't sweat the
No,
small stuff.
I think you're exactly right. It's funny though how it takes so long
To figure
not
that
to
out.
sweat the small stuff. Yeah, no, because
Yeah.
some event will happen in the day and you go, fuck, I'm
Ah,
really pissed. And
yeah.
and it gets back to putting things in your memory. And then you reflect back on it and go, why was that a big deal to me?
Yeah.
Why did I react that way? And there's a quote that I said,
You
because
can
what,
quote yourself. I appreciate that.
yeah, I'm going to quote myself, but
And then I'll quote you somewhere else
yeah,
saying
yeah, yeah. But basically, the quote was as follows: oftentimes, when I am critical of someone,
that.
it's actually a reflection of my own insecurity.
Mm, that is so true. Yeah.
And so, oftentimes when you get pissed off at somebody, it relates to your own insecurity. As an example, as you were saying, where we all sort of live in our world and try and do our thing and promote ourselves. And the reality is, there's always somebody who's going to be more prominent in whatever domain that is. And sometimes you're looking and go, "Fuck, why did that happen to me?" And then you sit there and you just have to let it go. And this is actually the nature of what causes suffering, right? It's craving and attachment. And
Mm,
I think that's something, that's a challenge, and it's something that we have to approach with this concept of equanimity, this
mhm,
evenness of temperament, where we don't get lost on the extremes. It's just like, I'm sure, the accolades you've gotten for many of the works you've done. You always want to sit there and hold that feeling and go, God, it feels so great. People are looking at me and they think I'm a great person. But unfortunately, it's transitory. and
mhm.
and wanting that or craving that all the time, just one,
Well,
it pulls you away from being present, and
mhm.
two, it makes you suffer.
Yeah, I want to hold on that for a second because I think one thing I've really realized about turning off my screens, like a feeling shift that happens every week, and it's so specific that I feel like when I'm online and the way the world's designed online, it just makes you want more. Like you're so hungry. You want the next email. You want the next stressful headline. You want the next notification. You even want to see the next thing of someone doing something you wish you were doing. You want, you want, you want. You're like this hungry beast online because it is created that way. Like the Pavlovian, you're just
Sure.
wanting, wanting, wanting. And then on
Well,
Friday,
that
well, I was going to
well, I was
just
gonna,
go
oh,
ahead. Say what you're going to say.
no, I was going to say, well, that's why Facebook and all these companies employ all these psychologists
Right. It's
and
designed that way.
neuroscientists.
The
Yeah,
For
it's like
bad though.
media.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's designed to make you want something you can't have, and or you'll never or you're stressed, but maybe there's something even more stressful coming. It's just designed that way. So then on Friday, when I turn off my screen each week, first of all, I can't wait for it to come. I'm like, "Oh, it's Friday. Okay, I get this relief." And I turn it off. We usually always have people over for Shabbat, and it's like I feel my central nervous system kind of coming back. I'm regulating and then and then this miraculous thing happens, this shift where I switch from wanting things I don't have to being completely happy with what I have right in front of me because my eyes are up from the screen. I'm like, look at these people around my table, the garden, the animal, the flowers, the I'm so present, again, being present for what's right in front of me. And I feel this sense of deep gratitude and presence. And I don't want to be anywhere except where I am because I'm not being like shoved all these images or things at my face. And I'm just like switch into this moment and the state of presence and gratitude that is amazing. And then it doesn't end because by Saturday afternoon, Saturday early evening, I'm just about to turn my screens back on. I'm like, what happened in the world? I'm so curious. I had that thought, and I can tell my friend I had that thought, or I can look up the definition of that word that I couldn't look up because I'm offline. So it has this kind of rhythm each week because I'm not saying you should live your whole life offline, but I notice I remind myself the value of presence, of gratitude, of thinking, what am I thinking? And then I have a reappreciation for the value of connection on the internet because there is value to it. I think it's just that the way we're living now, most people, they never get offline and they never get that relief or perspective that you need. Um, and so I think all of these things are very much tied to, like you said, all the neuroscientists and social scientists that are designing a system to keep you hooked and wanting more. And you really have to have the courage to understand that maybe my own thinking is enough, and maybe what's right in front of me is enough, and I want to be present and appreciate what I have.
well, it's funny you say that, because unfortunately, the nature of social media, and I think, again, the nature of capitalist society is there's never enough. And this is a very sad thing. I'm sure you know a lot of very accomplished, perhaps extraordinarily wealthy people, and they cannot stop, right? It's funny. I was on Necker Island a while ago with a bunch of extraordinarily wealthy people. I think the average net worth was about 250 million
Oh
people,
my
and
goodness.
yeah, and it was an event for uh, uh, a private family office management company brought these people together to have a unique experience, and I was speaking on meditation. Let's see, it was compassion, meditation, psychedelics, and beyond.
Ooh, that sounds like a beautiful suite of ideas to explore.
Yes, but it's interesting because I talked to some of these people, and it's not just that subset of people, but a guy's going, yeah, I'm worth 250 million now, and he's probably in his mid to late 30s, and he goes, I'm shooting for a billion. I go, well, what are you going to
Why?
do when you get that
Yeah.
billion? He goes, well, then I'm going to go for 2 billion. And I'm going,
Oh
but
my gosh.
what is the point of this? And it's a competition they feel, but they never stop and think, once I have that billion, I could have such an incredible impact in the world. And it doesn't seem
No, it feels a
oftentimes they really think
very
that way.
yeah, I have someone in my life that has said that to me recently, and I just it makes me sad. I mean, it's that Sisyphusian, like, I mean, I think I always in my work is driven by a deep sense of curiosity, but also a deep sense of wanting to kind of give back something to society in a way that will inspire, educate, illuminate something. If you looked at any of my projects, it's really that feeling of contributing to this larger whole. And the person in my life who's so focused on the money, and I just yeah, I feel sad. I mean, I really that is a never ending. You'll never be satiated.
No,
You'll
no,
never be.
never.
I mean, the capitalistic model and the social media model. These are designed just you'll never be satiated. And as much as I do strive, I'm always like taking on a big challenge. I love that feeling, but I also feel like when I've completed it or contributed something, I feel like, oh, that feels good. Like it. In some ways, you want to make the incentive. You want to the incentives that are created by our society are so messed up, and you have to kind of rewire and be intentional about what kind of incentives you're setting up for yourself for that dopamine, because you can get dopamine from
Sure.
contributing and to society, and you can also get it from
From not.
something. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or a self-serving
Serving, yeah,
motivation or
that's
something.
right. Yeah,
Yes.
and it's like, yeah, I mean, even we have this section of the film to talk about volunteering, why volunteering is so good for you. It's so good for you because you're helping someone else and you're helping them feel better, and that conversely will make you feel better, but it doesn't start with you. It's putting the
The other.
attention off of you onto the other, and um, yeah.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I think I may have mentioned this. I have a new book coming out that's
No, you didn't. We only saw each other for a second, and then you
oh,
left. Tell me about the new book.
I guess now the podcast is about me.
No, I mean, tell me. I'm
It's called Mind Magic: The Neuroscience of Manifestation and How It Changes Everything.
Wow,
But
that's a great title.
the point is, it gets back to what you just said, which is, again, in our capitalist society, we have these narratives that don't help us, and
Mhm.
fundamentally, the people have a view of what they think they want. They don't understand what they need, and
Mm,
so they're chasing
mm.
fame, fortune, power, and they get lost in that. And versus, and actually, this book is the antithesis of The Secret, and I'm sure you're familiar with The
Oh, yeah.
Secret.
Yeah, because you're
which
the
is
science.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I want, I want, I want, and somehow all the I wants make you happy. And this is the complete opposite, which is the only way you can truly manifest in the most powerful way is not to be focused on self, but to look at the world through the lens of how can I be of service to others? And then I will get all that I want versus starting with I want X, Y, and Z, and you're not
Mm.
thinking about the other whatsoever. And
Oh,
I
that's
think
right
that
on.
shift,
Yeah.
and in fact, the first sentence of the book, which is somewhat provocative, is the universe doesn't give a fuck about you. So
Oh my, okay, wait, when does the book come out? What's the
in
pub
May,
date? May what?
May 7th, May
May
7th.
7th. I just saw another friend has that pub date. That's amazing. Okay, wait. Can you send me a galley? Because
Yeah, yeah, sure. I'll
uh,
do it for you. And actually, I'd love your opinion.
of course, because I have to tell you, I do this gathering. I just had it at my house. You know, I was named after the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, so that's the name of
Right.
my newsletter for 25 years. And then last year, I finally decided to have a breakfast at Tiffany's, and I invited my favorite women over, and I handed out a sheet that was like, "What do you want to make happen in the next year?" And it had all these different categories of like everything from, you know, what were your happiest moments from the last year, and is there a theme in them, and how do you make more space for them, and like who do you mentor, who mentors you, how do you make more space for those? So like a huge range of questions on these two sheets of paper. And then last year, and then I mailed it back to them, and I had another gathering. And this year, when I did it just a couple weeks ago, it was about 40 women, and I had them say out loud a couple of the things. And I do feel like manifesting is, you know, it's the prompts too. I mean, what you're kind of saying are the prompts, are the framework. And instead of being so self-focused, if you go outward focused, the rest will come. And
Exactly. Exactly.
I really love that, believe in that, and I'm excited to read your book because you're right. Like The Secret, it was one of those things where it was such a phenomenon and it was so dismissed because people felt like it wasn't based on any science. So you're going to come in and give the hard science on the same ideas, which are, I believe, as a journaler, I write things into existence. I speak them into existence. I do all the time. I mean, yes,
But you're doing it through the lens of I am doing this to help others. You're not doing
yeah,
it through the lens of
right.
Tiffany wants this, so she'll be more famous. And I think that that's the big difference for people. So yeah, I go through the actually the neuroscience and the different brain networks. And then I also have a discussion about the reality that you have, 100 million bits of information coming in through your sensory organs, which, of course, the majority of which relate to keeping homeostasis in your body. But on a conscious level, we have access to about 50 to 100 bits of information. But the point is that there are techniques you can use to actually embed that intention on a conscious level so that it actually, if you will, has a high likelihood of directing your subconscious in a way to help it manifest. Although, of course, manifestation is doesn't guarantee it will happen at all. But what I suggest is, if you use these types of techniques, more likely than not will they manifest. Uh, and so I go through many examples and also the neuroscience, and then actually there's a 6-week program in there to maximize your ability to manifest using sort of these techniques.
Oh,
So,
I can't wait to read it. I mean, I think so many of these tools I've described to you that help me help me navigate the world, right? When I tell you that turning off screens 1 day a week for 15 years, like, or 14 years, figure out which one it is before I write that
one of
down.
the two.
14 or 15, but a long time. That helps me hear myself think. And then my daily practices of writing in this 5-minute journal to start and end my day help me frame the day in a positive way because it's human behavior to want to go to the negative. So I say no, no, no. Even as my coffee settle in, let's frame on the positive. and it just sets my day in a positive way. And my brain naturally would have gone to the negative, like any human, for survival strategies. And so, really, as somebody that's 53 and lived this life and had all the things, a lot of things happen, here are tools that I've learned to help me stay steady and focused on the right things, you know, as I'm moving throughout this very messy world with a lot of messy emotions. And so I really love what you're saying, because it's a lot of what we're talking about is framing the way we think about things and the way we go about living a meaningful and purposeful life, right? I made this film called 30,000 Days. And in it, that's the average life expectancy of any human. 82 years equals 30,000 days. And in the film, it's just another 10-minute film. My great creative challenge is how to take something very complicated and distill it into 10 minutes or less. And in that film, it was to distill all the ideas around living a life of meaning and purpose cross cultures. And this idea of serving your community or the world, living with compassion, gratitude, all these things are in like every single culture, that these are like, these are the ways to live a good life. And it's interesting how that evolves once we have more science to back it up, or how it evolves in a screen-filled world that's doing everything to make you think of things that are off that track. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look back a few hundred years when people lived in these small villages, they were born there, they died there. But the thing is, everyone knew them from the time they were a child, and sort of they grew up in the village with people caring for them, and they lived in these intergenerational families. There
Mm-hmm.
was no concern about being judged or being anxious,
Mm.
and you never had this fear you were never good enough. Now, I'm making a gross generalization, but these are the places that are talked about as the blue zones, right? These places where people generally live to be
Oh
100.
yeah, and they eat a certain
Yeah.
way as well. I've
Well,
been
but
studying what they eat.
yeah, it's funny you say that because there are 10 million Mediterranean diet cookbooks, right? But the reality is, if you look at the science, well, yes, eating a good diet is great. Not smoking is great. Getting
It's
exercise is
connection.
great, etc.
Connection
It's
is
human
yeah.
connection and it's depth of relationships, and
Mhm.
those far, far outweigh all the other contributors. And so the question is, how do you get back to that, and or at least understand the power of that in terms of shaping our lives. And again, you talk about meaning and purpose.
Mhm.
It relates to being of service, whether it's locally, nationally, internationally, whatever it is. Because number one, that gives you meaning and purpose, which affects your physiology. Number two, that outward connection with others actually affects their physiology. So it's a
Yeah,
very
actually, you
powerful
know what?
thing.
I'd love to ask you one thing, because we've talked a lot about regulation in the film, and we're also going to talk about co-regulation. Because my producer has an autistic son, and when that's a big conversation, how to co-regulation, who should be around him. And I think I would love to hear your thoughts about co-regulation, because we also, an idea we explored in one of my films, I want to bring back to this one, is like the 5 people you spend the most time with, you will become. Choose wisely. And the
Yes,
people you
yes.
follow the most on social media, you will become. Choose wisely. Like, anyone you're spending a lot of time with is shaping your experience. So think about, who do I want to have around me? And sometimes that's not a choice, but the people you decide to be friends with is a choice. If you think about, who do I have a choice with and who do I proactively bring into my life? But what are your thoughts about co-regulation? And like, I could talk to you forever. I have another call soon, but I want to hear this, talk about this.
Uh, Well, it's fact. As you know, I mean, if you get, and we're talking about feminism, and I'm not sure if this is directly related, but
Oh,
you
I'm
get a
very
group of
related.
women together,
Yeah.
and at some point, all their menstrual cycles regulate, right?
Hmm.
Together, and it's interesting if you look at if you want to call it bioenergetics. Obviously, our brains put out oscillations and brain waves, but our heart does too, and those waves extend 5 or 6 feet out beyond you. So in fact,
I love
that
that.
energy that you bring actually has an impact on other people. And this is why, and I'm sure you appreciate, there's some people who you see and you're joyful about seeing them because for whatever reason they carry this energy and they brighten your day and you feel fantastic. And then, as you also know, they're sort of the energy eaters, who, as soon as you get to them, you're like, oh God, I'm exhausted. They're just taking so much away from me. And so
Mhm.
I think you're absolutely correct. I should introduce you to. Do you know Lisa Christine?
No.
Oh, you should check her out. She's actually in Mill Valley, and she's a good friend.
What?
Yes,
Oh, please introduce us.
it's with a K. Lisa Christine. She's a humanitarian photographer,
Hmm.
and she's, I think, been to 160 some countries, and her work is quite extraordinary. Her and I did a project together on human sex trafficking and human slavery,
Hmm.
and in fact, we were at the Vatican together about that. I'm not sure why I brought that up, other than the fact that she's an interesting person who I think the two of you would connect very well. Uh, the other thing, actually, before we go, um, what would you think of you and I partnering to create a park in San Francisco based on compassion?
I love it. I love it.
We're
I mean, I absolutely love it because I can't tell the specifics yet, but I am working on an outdoor art installation that has to do with trees, and I think a lot of what we're talking about could be really powerful within a yes. Yes, I'm saying yes.
okay.
You and
Let's
I
get
have it.
together
Let's
and
set
do
up
that.
another meeting. I think
Actually,
it
years ago, I was convincing the city of Palo Alto to do a park related to that, and they sort of initially agreed, but I couldn't raise the money to do that. But I think that would be something that would have an impact, and it would be something that would last a long time.
Mhm.
But it has different, I don't know if they're stages or different exhibits within the entity that are interactive with people. And so I think that would be really powerful. So
Maybe
let's
that's
do
our
that.
next art project
Yeah,
together
that's what
because,
I'm
it's
serious. Let's
been
do
we're
it.
like 10 years out. We have to do another collaboration.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my
Well,
god,
let's
what a
plan on that.
pleasure. What a pleasure to talk to you. It's just so
Yes.
wonderful, and I'm so
Well, thank
excited
you.
for your new book,
I
and,
will send you a proof of that, and
please,
you can give me your thoughts. So
I would love
always a
that.
pleasure.
Yeah, so fun and intellectually stimulating.
Again, thank you for being with us today. The Into the Magic Shop podcast can be found where you find your most popular podcasts, or you can find us at intothemagicshop.com.